Hi, everybody. This is Heather Lockett with Lasting Conversations, and I'm here via Zoom with the absolutely extraordinary Brooke Sternberg. Hi, Brooke.
Hi, good afternoon, Heather.
You know, Brooke is a returning guest, and I'm very honored to have her here. And everything's very synchronistic here on Lasting Conversations. And we are birthing something. Brooke is a birthing doula, and we're going to get into all of that in a second. But right now, as we speak, it is Easter weekend. We're going to be heading into Passover. We still have an eclipse. We have all kinds of celestial things happening, all about creation and birth and loss and leaving things behind and what then grows. That's what springtime is. Mm-hmm. It's a rebirthing from things that have lied dormant and have been quiet for a while. So we're going to get into all the amazing things. And what's interesting is how, the last time, Brooke, that you were on the show, and that show's called Birthing Wise, and we're going to keep referencing it for listeners and YouTube viewers to go back to viewing to Birthing Wise, where Brooke describes specifically what birthing doulas do, et cetera. But when we were recording, there was a moment that I kept getting this little tingle ding. What I learned immediately after was that a baby was born that was special to me in our world. And actually one of the friends of our show, Joe Brockman, whose son, AJ Brockman, who's in a wheelchair. And it's a miracle of modern science and love and humanity that baby was born while you and I were talking about birth. So I will just say there are never any coincidences, and love abounds, and community and support. And that's part of what we're talking about today for our collective, for the women, for the men too, for families in general, and the medical community, and the helpers who need help. These are some of the things we're going to talk about today. So again, hi, Brooke.
Oh, thank you for having me on again. I feel very honored and privileged. And I'm excited to share with your audience the discussion that we have to, illuminate for them today, because I think it's Perfect. A really important thing with what we're going to share. So thank you for having me on.
Well, thanks so much. And this was all very impromptu, so I appreciate it. When it's time to record, it's time to record. So, okay. So right. Brooke, your business is called Aspired Mother, and you are a holistic birthing doula in the practice for helping the modern family. It's a modern mom, but it's the modern family these days. And we know that families come in so many flavors, and it's about, honestly, the empowerment of these families, of these women, to know their bodies, to hear their own call, and to communicate, and to help communicate with the modern technologies, the doctors, the hospitals. And you have some things to say about the business of doulaing, which is morphing and changing. Now, we've known that there have been midwives and doulas since the dawn of time. These days, there's another art to it, or it's coming back. We'll put it this way, it's coming back. And the one other thing that we will kind of circle into is for the women who might feel like they're at a loss for their own reproductive care, because as we know, we're not touching politics, but hot damn, man, these ladies are left out to dry for thousands of miles. And so we're offering up energetic support, if not more, to help with the resources of reproductive support, body support, and that knowing of your own body and where to get help. So again, Brooke, we're going to tap into all of it. So
juicy.
It's so juicy. It really, really, really juicy. Is.
Yeah.
Where would you like to start? In the beginning, there's, a sperm and an egg. No, but even before that.
Well, how about starting off, what is a doula? Just to kind of give even your new viewers who maybe have never heard of the term doula before.
Right, because there are birthing doulas, there are life doulas, there are death doulas, there are people that are there to be guides and to be with.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. The way to describe it is, if we go back in time, queens and countesses would have their ladies in waiting. they're right. The women who would always support them and be at their side. And for this specific period of a woman's life, becoming a mother is, if we look at it, in terms of archetype, she is a woman, a maiden who is coming into the next level of her persona as a mother, and bringing her through that process of embodying that mother archetype. And for doula during this period of time, we're very much that what it's known to be is a birth companion. We support women. There's a variety of different doulas within this period of or transition of a woman's life. So we have fertility doctor or fertility doulas. There are abortion doulas. There are adoption doulas. There are doulas that work with families who are going through surrogacy. There are those of us who primarily focus on birth support. So we support the family through pregnancy into postpartum. And then you also have postpartum doulas. And for me specifically, I'm a full spectrum doula. So I support families from conception all the way through 6 weeks postpartum. I'm there to support you through the pregnancy. I'm holding your hand and supporting you through labor and the act of giving birth. But I'm also helping you restore your energy centers and kind of come back into your own being post-birth through that sacred window in the first 6 weeks of birth. And in that postpartum period, I was trained through an Ayurvedic lens. And that, again, brings you back into that mind, body, and spirit connection. And that really being a huge, important piece that in our modern Western society, we don't necessarily recognize the importance of. And yet all around the world today, there are still cultures that this is just such a part of their society and culture, is that women have this kind of support even into those first 2 years of postpartum. So it's something that has been going on since the dawn of time. Mm-hmm. It's just new to many of us in our American society. And here in South Florida, it's becoming it's becoming more popular as women and young families are moving in from other states where it's a little bit more of a dominant or mainstream service that we provide families.
Right. And also the notion of if people have been moving and you're away from your support network, your mom or your family or your friends, so who is by your side as your guide in this time?
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. And, it's providing information. It's to offer education, advocacy, to help you and your partner advocate for your preferences, to provide the physical care and comfort. So if you are going through labor, I'm there to support you through labor, to know what kind of positions can you try any given moment to try to help your body and your baby through that process, and to alleviate any bit of discomfort. We do different comfort measures, acupressure, hydrotherapy, a TENS unit in replace of or before you get an epidural. There's all kinds of techniques that we come in through extensive training and education to know how to best support you through the physiologic birth, but also a cesarean, and how to support you and your husband as you navigate going into the OR and coming out of the OR, and now connecting with your baby with just that simple little change in how to give birth. It makes a difference in having somebody there beside you who's got the experience to support.
This is also beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And, everybody's experience is so intricately different. And we can I have a question here, but it will segue into kind of the business of doulaing as well, because as you were mentioning, so many different flavors of it. And I think some people might question whether, is it safe? Is it this or this? No, you personally, you are very well versed and in with the best of all kinds of care. So yes, there are home births, and do you have people that do you do water births and home births, or are most of your clients actually wanting to be in a hospital setting and partner? You also partner with the medical team, and many doulas and midwives don't. So I know that these are some of the choices that people make within the business.
And these are great questions. If there's somebody who's watching this or listening to this and they are pregnant and they are, really contemplating if hiring a doula is what they want. Mm-hmm. I can't encourage enough people to, we all hear the saying today, like, do your own research. But I think it's important to really interview multiple doulas. Every doula brings in a different experience, different energy. We all, have different education and different things that we bring in from prior careers and modalities and experiences. So interviewing a doula or multiple doulas is really important because they're going to come in with their own philosophies. And a lot of times in being a mentor to new doulas, one of the things that comes up a lot is, well, I'm not a mom. I haven't experienced birth. I don't know if I'm going to be a good doc or a good doula, or who would want to hire me as a doula. And the one thing that I can express is that I think we all, for the most part, have the capability of being a doula. It's a very instinctual experience. And for anyone who has been a witness to childbirth, there is this natural rhythm and flow, even as female nurses or midwives, that there's something very instinctual and very natural. And that's what sold me on becoming a doula to begin with, because I watched my niece be born, and in front of me, there was just this flow that I was like, I picked up on it and I was like, I want to be a part of this. It was so spiritual and magical. Women serving women in a woman's most vulnerable time of her life. So to answer your question, I, in my own practice and business, tend to find myself working with a lot of hospital births than home births. It's just who is attracted most to me with the services that I provide, and being an energy worker and being very hyper attuned to a woman's emotionality and always gauging the space. They are most attracted to me than maybe someone who's a little bit more secure in a home birth space. But honestly, it's a vibe. And that's where it goes back to like what I was just saying about interviewing doulas, because every doula is so unique and it's such a personal experience. And what ultimately needs to be decided is from the mother, do you feel like I am that person that you feel like you can trust and holding your hand and guiding you through that birth experience? And that is she's the only one who can determine that. Mm-hmm. And that is something that I go back in terms of business and sharing with other doulas who are just starting out, that we're in the business of birth. There's always going to be births going on. And it really isn't a space where we need to be competitive.
Right.
There's always a family that's going to need you, the energy you bring to them, and the services that you provide.
Right.
And we can eliminate this need for competition in our industry, in our community here in South Florida, because I'm not for every family. And part of that interviewing process that we have with a prospective client allows her to determine what's her personality as a doula? What are her beliefs as a doula? I do the same with a prospective client. What are their beliefs and assumptions in birth? And having that initial conversation will hopefully help them understand, oh, I feel connected. I feel like Brooke is aligned to my mission and values in terms of how I want to give birth.
Well, and I can imagine
here in South Florida.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I can imagine, especially as new parents, that you are a great guide, especially as the intuitive that you are, because sometimes they wouldn't know what to even ask. What do I not even know? And this is where someone like yourself, beyond the OB office, which the OB offices are fantastic and all the books are fantastic. Mm-hmm. But if you or anybody else within the doula-ing has that special sauce to say, have you considered this or have you considered that? And then let them feel into this or that.
Right. A doula's role is filling in the gaps.
Right.
And what is the state of our obstetric care today is that they are so, at least down here in South Florida, they are so over-flooded with patients, and the expressed frustration from families to many of us doulas is that they feel like a number. They don't get that one-on-one attention and care. And part of having a doula through that entire process, that entire transition into becoming a mother, is that consistent person on your side who is supporting you emotionally, psychosocially, which is really important, right? Mm-hmm. To some capacity spiritually, and physically, but like being that consistent support system. Your husband is your husband. They have the capacity for very specific aspects of your journey, but that deep inner work that is required from moms, you can communicate openly and a safe space and container with a doula. Mm-hmm. What those aha moments are, what spiritual reflective thoughts have crossed your mind. You can even share those with your mom and your girlfriend, but they're always going to come in from their perspective and not mm-hmm. necessarily always know how to hold space for you and help you dive deeper into exploring, right, what those realizations are in terms of it. It's a transition. It's a transformational experience. And there's a lot of personal work that has to occur before becoming a mother. And being able to work with someone who is very aware of that inner process and that inner work, and having the ability to hold space and create that safe container for you to reveal, even to yourself, areas where you may have never even shed light on as to who you are as a woman. Mm-hmm. Who do you want to be as a mother? In addition to all of the medical knowing and knowledge that one would need to give birth in a hospital space, it's being able to bring her to awareness of that primal instinct that occurs, what is going on to her and within her body during the labor process, to help give her some sense of confidence and feeling empowered, that she's aware, oh, all right, I'm feeling this within my pelvis, and it's because my pelvis has to expand to make room for the baby's head. Oh, I'm feeling that. And through that open communication in labor, your doula is there to say, remember what we talked about? We were talking about what happens in your body. That's why you're feeling this.
Right.
And hopefully that conversation can allow you to be a little bit more at ease and of trusting the process of what is occurring, especially as a new mother. You've never experienced it before. Right. You've never experienced a contraction. And it's very new. And it's scary because in our generation, we're even more removed from the birthing experience. We're in a period of time where what we are shown on TV and in social media is a lot of, I don't think with intent, but it's fear mongering, right? Birth is a very fearful thing that we have. We're conditioned to think birth is a physiologic negative experience.
Well,
and a lot of times that can.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I immediately jumped to my mother's time, which was really, so even 40, 50 years ago, somehow the medical establishment decided to take the women out of the equation. Not only there weren't any family members or visitors allowed, or the dads right there, but the women were knocked out. So the women were not even We were not even, I won't say me, but my mom in the 60s and earlier, they were just, you don't even need to be there at all. It was stripped of any connection to the whole process. So that nowadays, that just doesn't even happen unless and until there has to be a surgical scenario. And even then, the medical establishment, they do not want the moms passed out and gone during the process. We all know this now.
Yeah. And you're so right about that. And recognizing what the risk and benefits are for every form of intervention. Mm-hmm. Preparing yourself mentally for it, whether it is a home birth, a birth center, a hospital, no matter where your birthing venue is at, it's important to prepare, not only physically, but mentally. And what we're finding, or what I have found through my own experience the last 5 years as a doula, we're not preparing ourselves as women in the millennial alpha generation. We're not really preparing ourselves. And I don't know if it's necessarily that prior generations did. The home environment, the role of a woman has changed significantly enough that we are not exposed to women in our family breastfeeding in front of us. We're not exposed to watching other women give birth in front of us to learn.
Right.
And because the medical system has taken over the birthing experience, and that it has become such a medicalized intervention, there's so much intervention in the hospital space that we've lost sight of like our own capability to birth. And going back to what you were saying about prior generations being knocked out, that impacts that bonding experience between the mother and the child. Right. And if we think about the epigenetics, after generation, we're coming into a lot of children with this disconnect from their their family, their parents. A lot of mothers want to do formula. Now, personally, I don't have a personal preference. I don't shame a mother's choice for choosing to only do formula. There's all kinds of reasons why women have to and choose to. Yep. But it's the bonding experience. We're not paying attention to the birth experience enough. And I feel like we're selling ourselves short as women because there's so much inner wisdom that is acquired in the birth journey. You pull yourself through such a physiologic, life-altering event, and it instills this level of confidence in you that we're just not experiencing enough. I think here locally, it's about 22% of the births are out of the hospital. Okay. 43% of the births are cesarean. 67 or 68 or 9% of the births are inductions. And so there is just like this level of awareness of like.
What was that? How many inductions?
About 2/3.
Wow.
Right. So 2 out of 3 women are being induced here in South Florida.
Did anybody ask the babies if they want that? I mean, because that's intense. I'm just saying, one of the things that, and we'll, again, everything kind of just swirls right within each other, is within the birthing experience, there is that natural rhythm. And ultimately, all that planning can go right out the door in some way. In terms of, for instance, I had a plan. My son was going to get born in Boston at this hospital with this doctor, and he came 2 weeks early, and it just was happening very quickly. And yes, I did have some birthing classes. I don't even know if they have birthing classes anymore, where you're learning about breathing and Lamaze and whatnot. But when you're saying about bounce, I didn't know the thing about you bounce. Apparently that's a whole stage and you're bouncing on the bed. But I had to let go and was literally part of this interesting rocket ride of what is happening here. And it is happening. And I was glad to be in a hospital and not at the side of the road in a blizzard. That was different than, so my daughter, a second one, where again, I was very grateful where I was, but I wasn't heard. I knew, and yes, they induced, but I didn't want the induction because my daughter came later. And the second they broke water, I knew my body was doing its thing naturally, and the doctor didn't hear me to say, stop. So that was just a whole other thing. So that's my own little personal trigger is, okay, induction if you have to, but why is it assumed? Because, it just adds a whole nother thing. And I don't want to go so far off tangent, but
yes,
this gets into, is there a way for the family to feel into and educate, but to really sense what is it that's most important to me and moving forward? And if it, that seems to be the nugget of it. So I'll give the mic back to you.
Well, no. And I appreciate you sharing that, because
I was just astounded that two-thirds is induced, and that we've swung to a more, even more medical, industrialized, for the lack of a better term, solution than the other way, which had been more natural. Or that blend.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And every region of our country is going to have its
as something different. Okay.
Climate. Mm-hmm. But here in South Florida, if we think about culture, it's definitely a big metropolitan city down in Miami. You've got a lot of different cultures that we are faced in dealing and adapting to. Mm-hmm. And so it comes with, its own complexities. We are a very big community within the Tri-County area, and there are a lot of birthing mothers, and not enough OBs, not enough OBs, because we go in thinking, all right, we have a gynecologist, and then once we get into that next stage of our lives where we want to start planning, family planning, we move to an OB. But many times women don't think of, what if I wanted to hire just a midwife? A midwife is the highest level of a nurse in the labor and delivery area in the field, and they are their extensive additional education beyond nursing allows them to be able to be at your side and to provide the clinical care without an OB. Mm-hmm. OBs are amazing, and we have some amazing OBs here in South Florida, specifically here in Palm Beach County. But I just want to call attention to that, we notice there is just everyone's at high risk, right? And maybe some of that is because we are having children later in life. But a lot of times we're not high risk. We just go into the direction of, OBGYN is who I go to give birth, with lack of awareness that there's other options. And so part of speaking to a doula, really, in your ideal situation, when you're starting to think about conceiving, and just start interviewing doulas and having conversations without actually hiring them, but calling around and having these open conversations with doulas in your area will help you start thinking about what questions you need to ask yourself and start asking your providers, because who you bring into that birth space as your birth team, because to me, it's very much a team environment, shapes the outcome of your birth experience. And if you're working with an OB who is a trained surgeon, you're more likely to go in that medicalized intervention direction than you are with a midwife, because the midwifery model of care is vastly different than the obstetric model of care. And that midwifery level of care is very trusting of natural childbirth. Now, there are midwives who work with OBs in their practice, and there are midwives who have supported their clients who ultimately needed to have a cesarean. It's not common, that is just dependent on skill and who they work with in terms of an OB and their level of confidence in doing and performing cesareans. But I think it's important to call out that there isn't a one way to navigate or to enter that birth journey or that childbearing journey, is that you can certainly consider other options, not even outside of a hospital, but just within the hospital setting. And knowing as early as possible, what are those steps you need to take? So I had mentioned a lot of us are aware of the fact that a lot of young families are not taking childbirth education classes. And I hear from all the times that I meet with clients where their mom or their mother-in-laws are visiting or in the home, the time where we're meeting, it's like, oh, well, I took this class when, the Bradley method. I took Lamaze when my daughter, when I was getting ready to have my daughter. So the prior generation, the last two generations, were doing childbirth education classes. And for some reason, we just are not seeing that continuation of how many families. And it's word of mouth. And there are a lot of families coming in from other countries where they may not have had childbirth education classes, or their mothers are coming in from other countries where they didn't have classes, weren't informed, but very trusting of their instinct.
Right. Are the hospitals and offices even offering them anymore?
Some do. Some do. But what I guess I want to touch upon is the importance of taking a childbirth education class.
Right.
There's a lot of preparation. Birth can take up to 3 days. Birth is a marathon, not a race. And so being able to mentally prepare yourself for that long journey ahead is really important. Preparing yourself to really understand there's a lot more to it than decorating a baby's room.
Right.
There's a lot of inner work that has to occur to, even if you end up going into your third trimester knowing no matter what you have to have a cesarean, there's a lot that goes with that. And there's a lot of opportunity in pregnancy to really be prepared for the what ifs and how, and with a cesarean, your recovery period in those first 6 weeks is vastly different than a vaginal birth. And there's specific attention that you need to give your body, your digestive system, your womb. Just there's a lot of different things that are going on. And how does that impact breastfeeding? Breastfeeding is something that we're really not exposed to, because we went through this period the last 30 years where women were shunned to breastfeed. And we're starting to see this new movement of women, like, I'm just going to breastfeed in public. And it is what it is because it's a very natural experience.
Right.
And so we're kind of breaking away from this, how do I even want to word it on here? We're breaking away from this conditioning that we have in our culture of modesty, and breastfeeding is a very natural thing. So we're seeing a lot of the younger mothers doing that.
Right.
And we also see the other side where there's a lot of moms who just want to do formula. And so I guess the best thing is just to think about speaking to doulas, getting to know some of the doulas in your area. Start thinking about those conversations that you want to have with them so that they can help you formulate questions as you're interviewing prospective providers, because they will ultimately be the ones that they are either going to tolerate or support your birth preferences. And if you're a mom who wants to have an epidural but not have an epidural until the very end of labor, you want to have your birth team who's going to support your choice to do everything you can to have an autonomous birth until you've hit that threshold.
Right.
I've had OBs who say, no, she's not getting an epidural because she wants to have a natural childbirth. And at the same breath, go in there and speak on speakerphone in between her legs, taking conference calls, completely disrupting that sacred birthing space and just taking over, to then giving her an episiotomy without even communicating to her husband, or I, that that's what he decided to do. And in his perspective, it needed to be done, but he completely disregarded the woman, the body, the woman who's tied to that body, that you just manipulated.
And someone's on the phone. Someone's on the phone. You learn something new every day.
You learn something new, and
you
it
just
occurs.
learned. Sometimes I do get gobsmacked. Come on now.
And that's why I have the most respect for the L&D nurses, because they're the ones who've seen so much.
Wow.
And there is this level of, I want to go into every birth space knowing that I'm a team player.
Sure.
I am the doula that doesn't necessarily have a personal experience or vendetta towards hospital births or obstetricians. I do have a respect. I see that there is a need for it. I have a level of respect for modern medicine, but I also know that it's not my position to essentially interfere. Now, my role is to advocate and to help her advocate prior to birth.
Right.
And it varies, because if you're dealing with a woman who was sexually abused as a child by a man in her family, she's not going to want to go ahead and have a male OB. But what if she hires me late in the game and there is a male OB in that OB practice? And even though that's not her OB, but she goes into labor, just so happens on the day that he's the one on call.
Right.
Is she going to be in a position mentally to advocate for herself, to say, no, I want another doctor and it has to be a female? Is she even in a space where she can comfortably communicate that to her husband? Is her husband going to receive that and take his role as providing and protecting her to communicate that? Or does she have a doula who's going to say, part of our birth plan is to make sure that there are no male people, no other men besides her husband in this birthing space? And if there are issues within the labor and delivery floor for that, we have to then step into these situations where we're determining what is our recourse. Do we move to another hospital that can support us? I mean, there are so many different scenarios that can happen to ensure that a mother has as much of her preferences met as possible, while ensuring that the health and safety and welfare of her and her baby are looked after. And I think that's where that balance comes in as a doula. Is like, you want to advocate and support and empower her to advocate for herself, but also know that your role isn't to control or take over the birthing space,
right?
Especially in a hospital space.
Thank you, Brooke. We really appreciate you. Our conversation is so rich and full that it actually is continuing onto a second episode. So please stay tuned. This is Lasting Conversations. We get to the heart of everything.